And we're on. Kaighla Dayo, thanks for being on Fitness and Consciousness.
Thank you so much for having me, Ryan. It's really such an honor.
Yeah, so we just, as far as I know, we just popped into each other's existence yesterday, and you commented on one of my Instagram posts about the podcast, and then I clicked on you, and it said Muslim author, storyteller extraordinaire. And the more I looked, I was like, "Oh wow, she seems really interesting." So I invited you on the show. And that was just yesterday. So I'm glad it worked out so soon.
Yeah, so am I. I'm really glad. My kids are in bed finally. It's quiet.
Yeah, it's about 10:30 at night my time, and like 9:30 yours. But that's fine with me. Sometimes the best ones are like a little bit later when it's quiet outside, quiet everywhere.
Yeah.
So I did look into your Instagram and the links that you gave me, but you have such a broad story, and there seems to be a lot of rabbit trails to go down. And so I have some questions, but I can mostly just kind of give the floor to you and tell the story, and then I'll ask you more about what you're saying, because I don't want to get in the way of your story by pretending I know everything about you already, and I'm just acting that out
Yeah.
on the show. We just, like I said, kind of met online yesterday. So
Yeah, absolutely.
you authored a couple of books. I think you wrote one yourself, and then you co-authored one, right?
That's right.
And let's start there. What are they about?
Right. So the first book that I wrote was the one I co-authored with my friend Teresa, and it's called The New Muslims Field Guide. And it's a one-of-a-kind, practical, in-your-face, honest, humorous guide for people who choose to embrace Islam in a post-9/11 world where it's often a hated and misunderstood religion. Um, when we come into this religion, oftentimes we lose the respect of our family. We might lose our job. We might even lose our shelter, our home. We lose friendships. We lose so much in embracing this religion. And then we're faced with kind of this new life. This Islam is a complete life system. It's not just a belief system. It kind of helps you dictate the choices that you make, from getting up in the morning to going to sleep at night. And so it's a lot of changes. And unfortunately, as soon as you embrace it, your own zeal, your own enthusiasm, plus the pressure of the community often makes you feel like you need to be perfect right now. And of course, that's not how it is. If you've not studied Islam, I can tell you that there were 23 years from the first revelation that Prophet Muhammad received to the final one. People had 23 years to get their shit together, and we're expected to kind of do it overnight. And that's just not fair. So our book is really the book that we wish someone had given to us when we became Muslim. And it's unique because it's written in English, everyday English. Again, it's really quite humorous at times. We don't candy coat. We're not interested in making this look like it's going to be an easy thing, because it's not. We see the value of hard work, and that it really makes you appreciate it all the more. And we encourage that. And likewise, it's written by people with the experience. The vast majority of books, of kind of guides for new Muslims, as it were, are written by people that don't know what it's like. They have no idea how much you have to change, and how much you give up, and how much you're pressured to change even more. And the identity crisis that so many of us go through, and being told by our own community, I was called a traitor to my country. You don't love your country. You don't love your family. You're worshiping the devil, a false god, and so on and so forth. And then at the same time, we're told by the Muslim community, if you want to be part of us, you need to be like us. They want us to assimilate, often change your name to an Arabic name, dress like us. And depending on where they're from, a lot of them believe their perspective of how you should dress is the right one. And what do you do when you've got this mosque here telling you, no, you should dress this way, and that mosque over there across town, no, you should dress this way. So there's a lot that goes into it. And we wrote this book to kind of save people from the horrible difficulties that we experienced, because there was no one to tell us what to expect. And so it's written like a field guide, like you're going out on a trip and we're just telling you, hey, by the way, there's a huge pit over there. I really recommend that you don't fall in. Because I did, and it hurt, and it's not good news.
What made you, what was the, I guess the catalyst, or what made you what made you convert? Because you, and one of the things you said, you went from a convert and now you're a Muslim. You were a convert, now you're a Muslim. And you were talking about living in Egypt and how you were misled. And so I guess go into that. I don't want to even like ask the wrong questions because your story is so amazing. I don't want to get you on a track that's different than what you're wanting to talk about. So it's like, what was that made you change, and what was that like?
Well, so, I mean, I can tell you from the beginning that we get so tired of being asked, why did we convert? It's always such a complex set of decisions. It's such a complex transition that happens in your mind. But I can tell you that those of us who convert to Islam, we all have this one quality, this tenacity, this willingness to go against the grain and to search and ask the questions that no one else is asking in our societies, whatever that might mean. And so for me, I was a very devout Christian most of my life. My family is not. My family is very run-of-the-mill, Midwestern. Yeah, I'm an American, so I guess that means I'm a Christian. Like there's no connection to God at all in my family. But I was like the diehard zealot as a Christian. And so I was a Christian missionary for a while. I studied in Bible college. What I love is when I used to cover my hair, and I'll talk about that a little bit later, but when I was visibly Muslim, I've been Muslim 10 years now, and only 1 year have I not been visibly Muslim. So when I was visibly Muslim and I would sit in a coffee shop, there would always be, like literally every day, somebody would come up to me and ask me if I've met their friend Jesus and like evangelize to me. And it kills me because I would smile politely and be like, there's almost a, really, really likely chance that I know a lot more about Jesus than you do. Like, believe it or not. And also, Jesus is a beloved prophet in Islam. You cannot be a Muslim if you don't love Jesus. This is fundamental. He is one of the prophets. Jesus and Muhammad and Solomon and David and all of the prophets of Judaism and Christianity are prophets in Islam. And so it's funny to me when they're like, have you met my friend Jesus? Let me share the gospel with you. And I'm like, been there, done that. Thanks so much. But ultimately for me, I chose this path because I had a really big problem with the concept of us needing an intermediary between us and God. That, the picture that you see in the pamphlets that's like, here's you and here's God, and here's this chasm that your sin created. And there's no way for you to get to God. And then Jesus dies on the cross, and the cross comes down and it helps you get to God on the other side. And this whole concept that God was angry and hungry for blood, and it had to be the blood of a pure lamb like Jesus to save us and to purify us of our sins, and so on and so forth. I couldn't swallow that. If God is all powerful, then surely he has the capacity to close the chasm on his own. And if he knows that I'm sincerely sorry for the things I've done, because he also is all-knowing. So if he's all-knowing and he's all-powerful, why does someone have to die? Why can't I just say, God, I sincerely repent for what I've done? And he say, that's epic because I want to forgive you. So let's meet in the middle. And that's what Islam teaches. There is no intermediary. Islam is extreme monotheism. There is no other God but God. There is no intermediary. Prophets can't save you. Saints can't save you. No one can save you. You have got to approach God of your own volition. And there's beautiful, beautiful sayings throughout the Islamic tradition about the way God loves to meet us. For example, he says, if we go one step, he takes two. If we go to him an arm's width, he goes to a hand's length, he goes to us on arm's width. If we come to him with a mountain of sin, he comes to us with a mountain even larger of mercy. He wants to forgive and he loves. And that to me was the antithesis of what I was taught in Bible college about the message of Jesus. Yes, there's the love there. Yes, there's the I sacrificed my one and only son, and there's love there, of course. And I have great respect for Christianity and Christians in general. But the idea that I can come to God and God wants to meet me and nobody has to die first for it, it's just a beautiful idea. And kind of along those same lines, Islam categorically rejects original sin. This argument that because Adam and Eve made this choice and the world fell, that we're all now born with this innate tendency towards sin. Islam categorically rejects this. God forgave Adam and Eve because they repented. And so Islam teaches that we're all born pure, with pure hearts, inclined toward good, inclined toward worshiping God, our creator, the same God of Abraham, Isaac, and Jacob, God, the creator. It's our societies and our families that poison us to other paths, essentially, or to, atheism or what have you. So I loved these things. And at the time I had a 1-year-old son, and, I knew he was innocent. And of course, Christians can't even agree with each other about what they believe about the souls of children. Some argue for an age of accountability and so on and so forth, but that's nowhere in the Bible. And so these kinds of things all kind of came together for me. And I sincerely went on a kind of journey. I read everything I could read. I am an avid reader. I just can't get enough. And religion has always interested in me. So I just read everything I could about Christianity, about the different paths. I looked into orthodoxy as a possibility. I began to respect ritual and to see that, having grown up as an evangelical Christian, where it's all about how you feel. Do you feel God moving? Do you feel the Spirit? And it's really just emotion-based, to more ritualistic, where I worship God because he deserves it, not because it feels nice. And so Orthodox Christianity led me, ultimately, I ended up finding Islam. I had never met a Muslim when I embraced Islam. I just had come across reading about it in books, and ultimately chose to embrace it in August of 2009, which happened to also be during the month of Ramadan, where we do not eat or drink anything, even water, from sunrise to sunset for the whole month. So I did that. I became Muslim, and the next day I started fasting Ramadan.
Wow.
And yeah.
And I don't want to take too much of a detour for you, but when we were talking, I actually just picked up, I've read some stuff like ancient Islam. I got this book from the library the day that so I don't know if it's backwards.
Uh-huh. Yeah, I see it.
Early Islamic mysticism, Sufi, Quran, I don't know how to pronounce that, Raj, poetic and theological writings. And I don't want to take too much of a detour from your train of thought, but do you get into the mysticism part of it and what's that's talking about, or more, I don't know if it would be more of a contemporary
so
view, or
I appreciate that question so much, and it's really quite timely. At the beginning of my Islam, and also, by the way, the vast majority of converts have this experience, I was inculcated with kind of, if you imagine Islam on a spectrum, you would have, and I'm speaking solely from my own perception. I'm sure there will be Muslims who disagree with me, and that's fine. But as far as mysticism goes, you've got Sufis at the one end, and then you've got Salafis, essentially Salafis, way over here. So essentially, I grew up, I mean, as a Muslim, my initiation into the religion was very, very closer to this side. It was very about the external. It was about doing the right thing. It was about praying the 5 times of daily prayers, wearing hijab, fasting Ramadan, the 5 pillars of Islam that technically make you Muslim. That's all just very like the shell, the candy cover of Islam, and it's such a very thin paper cover. But the vast majority of Muslims don't ever pierce deeper than that. And under that is this whole sea of connection with God. That's what I wanted to get to. That's the core, the sweet, beautiful core that I want, and that made me hunger for Islam. That's what I want, because I've always been connected to God, and I want to be connected to God. I'm not interested in heaven. I'm not afraid of hell. I just want to be connected with my Creator. I have a firm belief that what makes heaven so wonderful is eternal, constant connection with my Creator. And what makes hell so awful and unbearable is complete and utter separation from God. These are my perspectives, and these are the perspectives of Sufism. But, you know, at the beginning, as I said, I was further to this side, and those who live further closer on this side, they believe themselves to be better, superior, if you will, because they stick to the rules. Because they stick, you know, the rules are very, very important, and the rules are very important. I'm not disregarding them. And so Sufis are kind of looked at, you know, from this perspective as woo-woo, as, you know, they're wanting something outside of what God has ordained for them. They're wanting some magical experience, and, you know, they want to be high, they want ecstasy, when really we want connection with God. And we see that the rules are there to facilitate that connection. We don't want to lose the spirit of the law because of our, you know, working to meet the law, which is what happens so often, by the way, in all religions, in all religious communities. If you become too obsessed with the letter of the law, you completely lose the spirit, and vice versa. So I would definitely call myself a Sufi, which is a development in the past year. Even though I considered myself a Sufi probably for about 2 years now, I didn't feel comfortable speaking about it openly until basically the past year. I mean, I could
Because
talk
of,
more about.
so like you, I didn't mean to interrupt you, but so you didn't feel comfortable talking about it because through the whole time anyway, you're dressing wrong according to them, or these other people. If you dress like them, then you're dressing wrong for these other people. So like no matter what you wear, it's going to be wrong to somebody. And like you're
Yeah.
not. So is it just like you didn't want to say, yeah, I'm Sufi now. I'm digging into this, and it seems like the way I want to go, because you're worried about this is one
Yeah.
more thing that you're doing wrong, or
No, not in that way, because I have great respect for my co-author and for the work we put into this book. And the vast majority of people who convert to Islam convert to mainstream vanilla Islam. We need to appeal to them. We need those people to have our book, because those are the people that really, really need to read it. And so coming out, first of all, as someone who's removed hijab and stopped wearing hijab, covering my hair essentially. And, you know, that was a big thing. And then to admit that I am very interested in the Sufi tradition, this could serve to ostracize us from the people we need to reach most. And so I was really afraid of that. And I went to my co-author, who happens to be a very dear friend of mine, and told her of my fears. And she really encouraged me to, you know, to be honest about my struggles, and honest about my spiritual journey and what I'm learning and how I'm growing, and to really present the truth to people, that just because you write a book doesn't mean you're going to stay that person forever. We are always changing. And so this past year has been incredibly transformative for me. But to really explain why, I'd have to tell you a little bit about how I got here really in the first place.
okay.
So essentially about 2 minutes or something after I became Muslim, and that's, you know, an exaggeration, but very soon after, I was 21 years old. I had a 1-year-old son. I'm white, in case you didn't notice. I was bombarded with marriage proposals. I kid you not. I didn't know these men. I didn't know their names. They didn't know anything about me. They knew that I was white and I was a new Muslim. And that was all that was interesting for them, for I'm not sure what reasons. They have their reasons. I was not looking for marriage. I was not looking for anything like that. I was happy to raise my son alone and continue in my religion. But I was pressured by members of the community that a mother, you know, you should not be alone. Like, it's a dangerous world out there. You need a man, and your son needs a man to grow and you know, to learn from him. And it's just, you know, and also, I mean, you have needs, sister, and a husband, you know, outside of marriage, well, that's not okay. And so you really need to be married. And I sorry, I wasn't 21. I was 23. I was just like, what? This was a big slap in the face for me, because when I embraced Islam, I believed only one thing. And this one thing is the pivotal part that makes you a Muslim, but there's so much more after that. I believed La ilaha illallah Muhammad Rasulullah, which translates to there is no God but God, and Prophet Muhammad is his final prophet. But that's all I believed. So I had kind of touched on the other things, but I wasn't totally sold on those other things. But we're kind of given a little shove at the end. If you believe this, then you're Muslim. Okay. So I didn't want to marry some random person that I didn't know. And there was no forced marriage or anything like that. I'm not going in that direction, but I ended up getting online and meeting a man in one of these Muslim marriage sites that claimed to be a professor, which, I mean, I love intellectual people. And so that was interesting to me, and I got to know him, and he seemed like a pretty nice guy. And he's, Egyptian. He tells me he's divorced. He's got 6 kids in Egypt. And we talk for a while, and I kind of like him, and he kind of likes me back. And then I find out he's actually a sheikh, or it's like a preacher or a minister. And I'm like, so you're not a professor then? That's okay. Why would somebody lie about that? Oh, that's odd. Okay. He says, well, I mean, I'm basically a professor. Like, I spend all day teaching people. I mean, that's like, well, I mean, but that's not okay. And then his English is wildly subpar. So I'm very sure he doesn't work in any university or school in America. And at the time he was living in Brooklyn and I was living in Chicago. Ultimately, he comes to Chicago. We get married against the advice of the people that were there to help me get to know him. Ultimately, he kind of wielded his, religious aura, as it were, and kind of, subjugated them and like, no, listen, I'm going to marry her and I want her and she wants me. And we don't care about your advice. Wow. And you have to understand, I know that this sounds insane. I really do. And now all these years later, I believe it's insane, but there's not really room in the conservative Muslim circles for dating. Dating is completely just unheard of. You marry a man your father has helped you choose, or your family has helped you, or they approve of at least, and you do it in a certain way, and there's steps involved, and you do it really as quickly as you can so that you don't really introduce a lot of temptation, as it were. And as a new convert, I didn't have family there. I didn't have a father to help me choose a guy. I didn't know anything. And this guy is a religious leader. I thought he's going to teach me about the religion. He's going to teach my son. I like him. We have chemistry. I mean, and so just jump straight to marriage. And that's unfortunately what has happened with a lot of converts. It's not good. So I married him and moved with him to New York with my son. And about 2 months after I got there, he told me I was not allowed to call my son by his name anymore, Dayo. I had to call him an Arabic name, because if anybody knew that my son's father was a black man, they wouldn't respect me. Because yes, Arabs are wildly racist. Again, I'm generalizing here, but okay. By and large, they are pretty racist. So, I couldn't call him by his name anymore. Everything about me was bad. I was supposed to be the wife of the sheikh. I was supposed to be a role model for the women in the community. And I'm like, I've been Muslim for 3 seconds. They've been Muslim their whole lives. What am I going to teach them? Right. And then I found out he was still married. I found out that his wife in Egypt was still his wife, and that he intentionally lied to me because he knew I wouldn't marry him, because I was never interested in polygyny. Polygyny is a completely and utterly outdated concept that should not still be going on, at least in the Western world. And I'm going to get a lot of hate for that, but I'm telling you from 7 years of a horrid experience that it does not typically go well. And the reasons for it and the things that justify it in a war situation, for example, they're just not happening now here in the West. And where it's illegal to have more than one wife, you're inherently robbing a woman of her rights. And that is a fundamental requirement for a man to have more than one wife. You have to be perfectly fair between them, with money, with sex, with time. That's a key thing, time, and with her rights and standing in the community. And when you have a secret wife, or a wife you're hiding from the government, a woman that you're absolutely maintaining a long-term relationship with, that everyone in your community calls marriage, but she doesn't have the recognized standing in your actual state, there's a whole lot that you lose. And I experienced that. So At the time though, I was already pregnant. I was pregnant with our first daughter. He was of the opinion that, and let me just make it clear, birth control is 100% fine according to Islam, but he himself needed a son. He had 5 daughters and a son in Egypt and was terrified of dying and leaving his daughters in the hands of just his one son, because that's what happened to him. He didn't want that for his son. So he really just needed another son. That was his obsession, was having a son. And so he brainwashed me into being his breeding mare. I was perpetually pregnant or breastfeeding for 7 years. I was never not pregnant or breastfeeding, or both, sometimes at the same time. And it was obviously very taxing. But I was already pregnant. I still had my small son. I didn't have anywhere to go. My family wouldn't take me back. I didn't have anything. And so I stayed with him. And ultimately we went to Dearborn, Michigan for a while. And that's when he really started breaking my identity, started destroying everything about me that made me uniquely me. Don't tell anyone about your past. Don't tell anyone about the travels that you've had, India and Korea and all the places I've been. Don't tell anyone, because good girls don't travel alone. And I need the community to think you were a good girl.
This was after how long now? Being married to him?
About a year.
About a year. All right.
Mm-hmm. And so then I had my daughter, and we found out that the government was going to try to deport him because he lied to the government about being married. They found out that he wasn't actually divorced from her because he was married to a woman before me, and she had tried to help him get a green card. And so we found out he was about to be deported. And I said to him, let's not fight it. You know what? This is God's way of telling us you're doing a wrong thing by having 2 wives and one there that you never see and spend any time with. You know what? Let's do the right thing. There's a fundamental teaching in Islam that if a man has more than one wife and he's unfair, when he faces God on the day of judgment, he's going to have half his body paralyzed because he was unfair to his wives. This is supposed to be a warning. Hey, don't do it. You're probably not going to be fair. And even the Quran says, no matter how hard you try, you're probably not going to be fair. So you really shouldn't do it. But he did. And so I encouraged us to move to Egypt. It was my idea. I was naive and stupid, and I thought that it would go well. I thought she would be happy that I brought her husband back to her. I thought she would be grateful that I wasn't this selfish American wanting to we did have a beautiful lavish lifestyle before we left. And so we went to Egypt, and this would have been December of 2011. And basically for the next 4 years, I was neglected, abused, left with my children alone in my apartment for days at a time. We always had food, technically. Sometimes it was just rice, but we had rice. I gave birth to my 3rd child in my apartment alone because he wouldn't pay for a clean hospital. The only hospital he would pay for was, I can't help you understand if you haven't seen a 3rd world country hospital. There were used syringes laying on the ground, glass. There wasn't any running water in some of the rooms. There was dirty sheets on the bed. They still strap women down and literally strap them to the bed when they're giving birth sometimes. And so I said, I'm not going to do that. I'm not going to expose my unborn child and myself to all these diseases. At least I can make my house super, super clean. And I've given birth all these times. I kind of know what I'm doing at this point. And by the way, it was actually the most empowering experience of my life. I'm not going to lie. Compared to my other 3 births, it was amazing. I'm not going to lie. Really, it was terrifying, but amazing. Knowing what my body can do when no one's there to inhibit me, which is the experience of what it is to give birth in the West, in a hospital. You're controlled, very controlled. I just, I didn't speak Arabic. I didn't have my own money. I didn't have the internet half the time. I didn't have credit for my phone to reach him. I lived about 3 or 4 blocks from his wife and her family, his wife and his mother and their children, who lived in a beautiful 3-story home. And I lived in a tiny apartment. And it was a lot of suffering. I can't really explain the level of just horrible suffering. I can say that my daughter was incredibly malnourished because I was malnourished. And because I cried all the time. They ended up calling me Amrikiya Majnuna, which means the crazy American, because I just cried and all the time because I was so heartbroken and just terrified. And then he moved me into his wife's house because he didn't want to pay my rent anymore, and relegated me to a bedroom and a bathroom. Like, she had 3 stories and I had a bedroom and a bathroom. And then when she didn't like my practices in her kitchen, she refused to allow me in. So he moved my kitchen things to the garage and had me cook outside, and wash my dishes with the hose, even though there was a kitchen upstairs, but I wasn't allowed inside. And I had no friends at all. And so it was a very isolating experience, a very, very traumatic experience. He never hit me once. He never raised his voice, nothing. He just neglected me and abandoned me and lied. The man is a chronic liar. He never kept his promises. And then the key thing this man did to me, the key traumatic experience for me, was him teaching me that God doesn't love me if I don't please my husband. And if my not pleasing my husband is me defending myself or trying to protect myself from him, God isn't going to love me until I allow him to do what he wants to me. And that fundamentally changed my perspective of who God is, and who I am in relation to God. To this day, I struggle deeply to know who God is and who I am.
When you're going through all this, do you think like, okay, I'm 9 months pregnant, this isn't what I signed up for, I'm headed back to Chicago.
If I had a place to go back to, I had nowhere to go. And you have to understand that,
because you're in a village. You were saying, like, before we started recording, I don't think that you mentioned it. Yeah, since the recording, but you said you're not in Cairo, or you're in a village. So when you're talking about a third world hospital, you're talking about not even the Cairo hospital. You're talking about some blocks with people in them, and that's a hospital. Like,
there was one particular night, the worst night of my life. My son, my eldest son at that point, who was about, I think, 5 or 6, jumped off of a chair and landed on his elbow, completely shattered his elbow and dislocated his shoulder. And that night, my husband was with his other wife at a wedding in the village, and I had no money, and I had no car, and I had no way to hire a tuk-tuk, which is like a motorcycle with a little wagon attached, to take us to the hospital. So they have this system where you can basically call somebody collect. I called the only person I even had their number other than my husband, which was the only woman that ultimately became a friend of mine in Egypt. Another woman who was also married to a sheikh in the village, and who had her husband take us to the hospital, the same hospital that I refused to give birth in, because that's the only hospital. And we went, and there were doctors standing in the hallway smoking, watching TV, and a man was dying in the room because they didn't have what they needed to save his life. And it's like, he's dying. What can you do? So they just stood there smoking in the hallway. Like, what are you going to do? And laughing at me because I was crying. I was I was losing my mind because my son was screaming bloody murder and didn't understand what was happening to him, and so on and so forth. So ultimately, though, after living in the house with his wife for about a month, and by this time, by the way, my daughter was only a month old, the one I gave birth to in my home alone. So there was some postpartum mixed in there. Also, it was Ramadan, and it's a very unique time for Arab countries. You stay up all night long and you sleep all day, which is, by the way, not the way it's supposed to be Islamically. You're supposed to actually go to work and live your normal life while you're fasting. But people in Arab countries just sleep all day and then get up and in the night and eat and have their normal life at night. And for a mother, with a baby who never sleeps, to try and get any sleep when people all night long are partying and yelling and dancing and music, and Egypt is never, ever quiet, ever. There was a lot going on. Ultimately, I attempted to commit suicide, and I had, been kind of going down for a while, but he didn't care, or I'm not sure. Ended up taking me to a therapist because I told him, like, if you don't get help from me, like, I'm going to die. And he like, you have to get help from me, which is very, very taboo in the Arab world, to admit that you're not mentally well. There's sane, and then there's crazy. There's literally no room for, like, I'm just unwell. And so he took me to this therapist, and God bless this man. I wish I knew his name. I don't remember it. Who looked at my husband and was like, you horrible, horrible monster of a person. You nasty, nasty person. Which, to say to a sheikh, the most respected level of society, to say, to him, like, you horrible dog. Like, I was so grateful for this man. And he said, you have to get her out of this. So I lived in Cairo for about a year. I worked at a school. Life was much better. It wasn't really so difficult. He went between Cairo and the village to be fair to us. And it, ultimately I had to go back to the village because his family didn't like him being in Cairo, and he didn't want to come to Cairo anymore. And I couldn't stay in Cairo without a husband, because living in Egypt without a man is very, very, very difficult, especially when you don't speak Arabic. So went back to the village, found out I was pregnant with my fourth child, my son. Finally, God gave me a son for this man. And I, that was when my eldest child broke his elbow and so on. And so we came back to the States so that he could get surgery. Because, again, dirty hospital. I went to the embassy and begged for help. And they gave me what they call a repatriation loan, where they take your passport and they charge you a very high interest rate. And you cannot leave the country until you pay off what you owe them, the State Department. So
you can't pay off. So what you're talking about, the American embassy in Egypt?
Yes.
They're giving you a loan to go back to the United States.
Yes. It's not the embassy that gave me the loan. It's the State Department through the embassy.
Okay. And then you're able to come back to the United States, but you can't go back to Egypt until you pay them back.
You can't leave the country at all.
You can't leave America.
Yes. They take your passport. You cannot leave until you pay them with interest. And when we came back, I had my 3 small children, and I was pregnant with my son. And my little sister, God bless her heart, kicked her roommate out. And so me and my sister and my children lived in this tiny apartment here in my hometown in Central Illinois. And she worked 2 jobs to provide for us, because I was very noticeably pregnant and also very noticeably Arab at this point in my mannerisms and in my ways of handling things. And, I was also incredibly traumatized and very, very shell-shocked, and just not in a good way at all. And he stayed there with his family. So, I mean, he wasn't sending us money. There was, so for basically a year, I lived off of her kindness and donations from various different Muslims that I've known for years, who would send me $100 this month or $50 the next month. And of course, welfare, basically.
Are you wanting to go back? Are you thinking,
no,
you're stuck in Illinois? Are you even wanting to go back? Or you're like,
no,
back that loan because I don't want to go back anyway?
No, I did not want to go back, but I didn't want to be a single mother with 4 children living with my little sister. Yeah. And that was really, really difficult. And he wasn't going to come. So ultimately, my sister and I, God bless her, she did everything to help us in that year. And then ultimately, she really needed to move on. She needed a life of her own. And so my children and I went to Texas because I had been told that there was a really good program for Muslim women in Texas for helping them get back on their feet. And that was not what we found when we got there. I feel like that should be the title of like my autobiography. And that's not what happened. Like that should be the title because that's what keeps happening. Ultimately, we ended up homeless. My children and I ended up homeless. God. We went to many different mosques and asked for help, and all but one laughed at me, told me I was lying. They didn't believe my story. They like, what kind of chick does these things? One of them actually, oh God, brought me
Probably
into
a
a
lot.
conference room. Say it again.
I said probably a lot of them, if I had to guess.
Well, at least one of them, this particular one, brought me into a conference room, made me air out my dirty laundry, tell my whole story. Okay, so everything I've told you and much more. And then at the end, they handed me $100 and said, if you'll divorce him, we'll find you a good man to take care of you. Because marrying a man I don't know is what got me into this situation in the first place. Okay. And I didn't. So his mother, my ex-husband's mother, God bless her, sold her ancestral land to get the money to pay off the repatriation loan. And I sold my van to get the money to buy tickets because we literally had nowhere in America to live. Nowhere. So we went back to Egypt, and believe it or not, things actually were not as bad. I was, I'd had some time to kind of recoup from what I'd been through. Finally, I had given him a son. Great. So now I was the respected wife that I should have always been. Now I wasn't relegated to the girlfriend who were still waiting to produce a son. Now I really deserve respect, and that's what happened. It really was a lot better. And then, miracle of miracles, another American came to the village. Another American woman married to a Coptic Christian came to the village, and she had a job with an American company that was paying her pennies, like literally pennies. And she got me a job. So finally I started making more money than he was making. And I was able to actually stand up on my own. And then my sister came to visit, the same sister that had, taken care of us, came to visit us. And she put $2,000 in my hand, took us on this beautiful vacation. It was great. We get home. He says, I want the money. I need to pay your rent. And I say, here's the dowry that you gave when we got married. I want a divorce. I never want to see you again. Thank you very much for destroying my life. I'm done. And of course, he did not give up easily. He refused to divorce me. He refused to even start the paperwork. He wouldn't. But ultimately I won. And we divorced in June of 2015. And then he promptly abandoned us in Egypt and ran away to Canada and left me and my children alone with no one again. And so after about 6 months, it was too much. And he blackmailed me and was like, look, if you do not marry me again, come to Canada and marry me again, I'm going to stop sending you any money for the children. Like, I'm just going to stop. So that's your choice. So I, gave the kids to him for 6 months and came back to America and got my own life together. And then, now that's been 3 years. So now I remarried. I have all my children. My life is certainly not great, but much better. And so in the past year, I have really, really had a rebirth experience, as it were. I wrote the memoir of that time in the past year. I began writing it last November and finished it in September of this year. And I'm planning to publish it in the spring, God willing. But having written that story was an incredibly healing experience, but also very, very traumatic to relive all of the things that happened to me. But at the end of the day, I am a firm believer in, having been through this, that pain is the greatest teacher. I learned how strong I am. I learned what I can endure. I learned what really matters in life and what doesn't. I learned so much because of Egypt. I'm very grateful for having experienced all that suffering because, I'm telling you, nothing that happens to me at this point could ever be worse than Egypt. Like anything that ever happens, I'm like, but it's not Egypt, is it? Yeah. So we're still good.
There's that, like a blues song and like this, like the phrase, it serves you right to suffer. Like at first it sounds like, well, that's a terrible thing to say to somebody, like they deserve it or something like that.
Yeah.
Like you're bad, so it serves you right to, but if you think about it, it serves you.
Oh, it does.
Right to suffer. It's not like you deserve it because you're bad. It's the suffering is going to serve you. And there's some something that I've been thinking about a lot and like listening to some different people like Viktor Frankl,
Yeah.
he was a psychologist and he survivor of the Holocaust. And I learned about him through Jordan Peterson.
Mhm.
And like Jordan Peterson talks about how, instead of like trying to live a life of happiness, think
Mhm.
more like a life of meaning.
Ah, yes.
And so, because happiness can kind of like come and go, but if you have meaning, if you have something to work
Something bigger than
for, you
yourself.
get your meaning with responsibility. So if you're depressed, like instead of just like sitting by yourself and being depressed, start taking on responsibility, start
Mm,
doing more things and for other people, and that can bring you out of it. This
yeah.
this story is really amazing. So when you're when you're writing your memoir, and you said it's coming out in spring, and the New Muslims Field Guide is already out, right?
It is, yes.
And did you leave out of your the memoir? Or did you leave out the worst that happened to you, or did
Oh
you
no.
include the worst?
I included the worst, but I'll tell you, I had a very unique writing style that saved me from the worst. I told the story, I told everything, I didn't leave anything out. But it was very important to me in writing this book to present the truth that those women, his wife and his mom, who worked so hard to make my life hell, they worked so hard to make me suffer. Those women are victims of this man. They are absolutely, in fact, his worst victims because I'm free. I escaped him. They'll never escape. Those women were doing what anyone would do in their situation. They have no power. And the
You're just
only thing,
echoing.
oh, I'm not sure why I didn't change anything.
No, I mean, I meant that like they are echoing what has
Oh, I'm
happened to
sorry.
them. Yeah.
Yeah, no, the reality that we see again and again is that people who are oppressed oppress others.
Mm,
The man who is treated like a dog at work goes home and beats his wife, and then she, neglects her children, and the children beat the dog. I mean,
yeah.
we all have this tendency, this knee-jerk reaction to take our pain and displace it and put it on someone else. And that's the fundamental problem. When you live from a place of love and compassion, you see that your suffering can heal people rather than hurt other people. And so I think that for me, I needed to tell this story in a unique way because I needed the reader to feel, don't feel sorry for me. Don't feel pity for what I went through. Feel sorry for all of us, and see that this man is truly a narcissist. He's truly an incredibly dangerous human being. And what makes him dangerous is his tendency and the reality that he is continuing his trend. I was the sixth convert he ever married. He married 5 other converts before me. And
Man,
since
that's
we've
pathetic.
divorced, he's married 2 other women. Okay. And he absolutely believes that, and let me be clear, this man is not a good Muslim. Okay. He is violating all the tenets of Islam while standing up and guiding the people and teaching them the religion. He knows Islam back and forward, left and right. He knows it to his core. He knows everything that, of course, not everything, but I mean, he knows, like, he has 2 master's degrees in fiqh and ahadith. This means Islamic law or Sharia. He understands that completely. And also ahadith, which are teachings or sayings from Prophet Muhammad himself. Okay. 2 masters. The man knows his shit. All right. But he doesn't know God. His heart has no connection to God, which is evident through his actions and his treatment of women. Prophet Muhammad, before he died, said, be good to the women. The best among you is the one who is kindest to his wives, and I am the kindest to my wives. You have got to be good to women. He also said, Eve was created from the rib of Adam. Women, they're naturally bent in a certain way. If you try and bend them to your will, they're going to break. Be good to women, okay? And this man fundamentally finds pleasure in bending women to his will. So I want to make it clear, because there's a lot of, in any religious community, there's a feeling of sweep it under the rug. We don't want to air our dirty laundry for the public. No, I am all about airing the dirty laundry of the Muslim community, because I want people to understand that Islam is perfect and Muslims are human beings. human beings who often choose not to do the right thing. And this man is that. So I didn't just write a memoir. My memoir can only justifiably be called memoir from about, the 2/3 of the book. The very beginning is me telling the story of things that happened before I ever came around. So him marrying his first wife, I write from her perspective. I tell the story from what I believe her perspective was. So that's just creative writing. I don't really know how she was feeling. She told me a little bit, but I mean, I don't really know how she was feeling, obviously. So a lot of this, I just had to develop a story to help, the actual events really happened, but getting to those events, I had to kind of create. And so as you open the book, the very first chapter is from his mother, written from her perspective. So I, saying, I'm so excited for my son. He's getting married. And she tells the true story of being forced to marry a 50-something-year-old when she was 14, and how grateful she is that her son, is getting the chance to have love, with a woman he wants. And then the next chapter is his wife, and she's about to marry him, and she's so excited. She's going to be the wife of the sheikh. It's such a great honor. She's known him all her life. She's been in love with him since she was a little girl. She's so excited, and then you start to see his character, right? He goes to Brooklyn and leaves her in Egypt with the family. She comes and joins him for a little bit, ultimately doesn't really like it, goes back home. He starts marrying women behind her back, and not telling her about it and all this other stuff. And then I come into the picture. And what do I say? Oh, I'm so excited. I'm going to marry the sheikh. It's going to be such a great honor. I'm going to learn so much. I'm so excited. And then you get to see his character, and you see how he repeated to me what he had done to her, right? And you get to see my whole story, but there are parts throughout where each of them are telling their perspectives. So to answer your question, I didn't write about trying to kill myself from my perspective. I wrote it from his mother's perspective because I could not relive that day. Wow. I couldn't handle it. So I wrote it from her perspective, which was obviously very simplified and didn't touch on any of the emotions involved in what brought me to that point. And that enabled me to tell the story, to get the point that you see what happened, you know what happened, but I don't have to write how I felt about it, because I can't, not yet. I can't. And so throughout the story, the perspectives change, and who's speaking because there's a little header at the very top that says, like, so-and-so. So he never has a chapter. He never gets to tell his side of the story, because his side of the story doesn't matter. It doesn't matter. Nothing he could ever say could justify the horrible things he did to us. And so you asked me earlier about a page in the book where somebody was getting slapped in the face by their father.
Yeah.
That was a chapter written from his wife's perspective, because one time she asked her father to come and to reason with the sheikh because she didn't like something he was doing. She felt he was being unfair. How she could ever think he was being unfair toward her is just insane to me. But she started to talk badly about me, apparently. I was told this by the people who were present. Started to say something bad about me, and her father backhanded her, just popped her across the face, and was like, Oma Abdullah. That's what they called me, Oma Abdullah, because they thought my son's name was Abdullah. Dayo. They thought Dayo's name was Abdullah. Oma Abdullah is not here to protect herself. She's not here to defend herself. And she doesn't even speak Arabic. So even if she was here, she couldn't. You're not going to talk bad about her, And then our husband defending her and being on her side, which never happened in their lives. It was always the other way around. That was one of 3 times in my entire time in Egypt that anyone was on my side. I like to describe it as always being the away team at a home game. Just, never, always being viewed with suspicion and mistrust and hate. So having written this memoir, I've been able to forgive his wife. I've been able to forgive his mother. I truly believe these women were just doing what anyone would do in their situation. The only power they had was to make my life unhappy. They had no power to make their own lives happy. And when you have this mentality that there's only so much to go around, and really, as far as his time and money was concerned, there really was only so much to go around. You've got to take what you can get. You've got to always just look out for yourself, and that kind of mentality. And that's what they did. But that's what anyone would do. I would have done that. And to make that point, at one point, he wanted to bring both of us to Canada. Before he ever ran away, he was going to take both of us there and work there as a sheikh in a mosque in Canada. And she said no. She said, I will not put myself into Kaighla's hands so that she can do to me what I've done to her, where I don't speak the language and nobody's on my side. I'm not going to allow her to have the chance to have vengeance against me. And which is something I would never do, but she didn't know me at all. So ultimately, the story ends, by the way, the book, with a new person coming in. And what does she say? I'm so excited. I'm going to marry the Sheikh. It's going to be great. He's going to teach me so much. It's going to be such an honor. And so you get this feeling throughout the whole book that this man he's repeating the pattern. And he is. His most current wife, he told her in front of me, I don't love you. I married you so you could raise my children because their mother is in America. You're nothing to me but a babysitter. Let me be clear with you. You're not anything to me. And she takes it because he chooses women that don't know their value. He chooses broken women from broken homes who have lost everything. And that's, his power. But the point I really want to emphasize is that I've grown so deeply from this that it's completely worth it. I feel like I have the wisdom of someone 20 years older than me because I suffered a life, that's got so much more in it. But at the same time, I believe that life is a beautiful, beautiful gift. I believe that, as I told you when you and I were messaging, I'm a diehard Stoic. I came across Stoicism probably about a year ago, and I have found more peace in studying Stoicism than in anything I've ever studied in my life. This concept of looking death in the face and saying, I welcome you. I know you're there. Have a seat by the fire and wait for me when I'm ready to come talk with you. And rather than acting like it's not a thing, and for me, Stoicism offers a sane, healthy alternative to YOLO. It's very like, you do only live once. So for God's sake, live a life of honor. Live a life that you can be proud of. Don't be flippant with this one crazy, beautiful life you have. Do something that matters because that's the only one you get. And for me, my purpose, my mission in this life is to get the message out there that the obstacle is the way. If you want to grow, you have got to go through the pain. You've got to dig into that pain you'd rather ignore, you'd rather run from. You've got to sit down with it and have dinner and ask it what it wants to teach you and look at it, face it. And it hurts, but you grow so much from it. And I believe that maybe the key reason for so much suffering in our world today is our aversion to discomfort. We're all so afraid of being uncomfortable. We do everything. We won't go to the bathroom without our phone because we don't want to be alone with ourselves for that long. I mean, we're so afraid of solitude, of tranquility. We do anything to never have silence, to never give our brains a rest because we don't want to know that person hiding in there. I wrote a poem back before I started writing the book about, I'm sure it's on Instagram somewhere, but I'm not going to try and find it right now. But it was essentially the story of our inner child becomes this horrible demon if we ignore it. This horrible biting demon that will not let you go. And it presents itself in the form of anxiety and depression and panic. But really, that's just your inner child trying to get your attention. I'm in here. Don't you see I'm suffering? You're making me suffer. The choices that you're making, you're hurting me. If you just listen to me, listen to the pain that you've forced me to endure with your choices, then ultimately that huge, horrible demon plaguing you just ends up being yourself curled up in a ball, so desperate for the love that you should have been giving it all this time. And I know that all too well. I, have spent my entire life perpetually in a relationship. I've almost never been single because my mother modeled that for me, that you cannot have happiness without a man. You can't have a meaningful life without a man. And you have to, a man is going to love you and make you feel good about yourself. And so it's been a real challenge to cultivate self-love. And when I started writing the book in November, I started getting a lot of, weird ailments, a lot of strange, I'm a really, really healthy person, remarkably. And I started just having very strange chest pains and just awful, weird things were happening. And I was constantly going to the hospital thinking I was dying. I had never experienced anxiety in my entire life. With all that I've been through, anxiety wasn't one of the things.
Wow.
And at one point in writing this book, I was having a panic attack every single night, unable to sleep, unable to rest, unable to have energy for my children and myself. And I know now in hindsight, it was a direct result of me digging up the trauma of this book and reliving all that trauma. And then the good Lord brought cannabis to my life and I started taking CBD oil. I have never before this time ever had any experience with cannabis. I was always the good girl. I never did things like that, but a good friend recommended CBD oil, and I'm telling you, it's a lifesaver. I began healing finally. CBD oil has absolutely enabled. I feel like I'm a spokesperson now for CBD oil, but it's really enabled me
now, because it is so legitimate for all kinds of stuff, from seizures and to the anxiety, like you said. So it's really amazing. I didn't mean to interrupt you. Go ahead.
No, it's fine. And I started making small changes, small habit changes. So I get up every morning and I journal the morning pages. I do 10 minutes of yoga, 10 minutes of meditation. Very simple. It doesn't take any time from me. I do it first thing in the morning if I can. I try and make sure that I do the dishes at night before I go to bed, because it's nice to have a clean kitchen in the morning. Just small things that make me feel better, that remove the anxiety from my life. And I have an artist date with myself. Julie Cameron, in her book, The Artist's Way, is the one that really taught me about the morning pages and the artist date. I take myself on a date every Thursday morning. It's kind of a joke with my friends. It's sacrosanct. Like, nobody violates my Thursday morning date with myself. No, you're not welcome to come sit with me. And no, we're not, no, I have to do this. Finally, my youngest is in preschool. And so I get 5 hours in the morning to myself. For the first time since I was 21 years old, I have a little bit of time for myself. And so I started writing the book during NaNoWriMo. Do you know what that is?
No.
It's National Novel Writing Month every November. People don't get together necessarily, but everybody just tries to write a novel. And if you write something like 2,300 words a day, you'll have a novel by the end of November. So I began writing my book last November. And it was every day doing it. It was, I would have to cry to my husband and just decompress from what I had written about that day and tell him these stories. And then I started writing only on Thursday mornings. After that, just Thursday mornings, I would write. I'd have my sacrosanct time with myself. I would go and buy some yarn to knit something, buy a candle, just anything, any small thing that makes me feel better, my little gift to myself. And then I would go and I would hide in my room the rest of the day to kind of come down from that experience of reliving the trauma. And my husband everybody knew, mom's not available on Thursdays. That's basically how it goes. So I finished the book, thank God. Wow. And finished 2 or 3 different edits. Now, currently it's with beta readers, people I trust, whose perspective I trust, who are, various kinds of professionals, good friends of mine, who can give insight, I think, into their perspectives on the book or things like that. And then I plan on publishing, again, self-publishing in March or April of this year. And I'm so excited because I can't even tell you how good it will feel to not have to think about this anymore. To really, I have been ruled by the feeling of victimhood for so long that it's going to be such a wonderful relief to see that, yes, I was a victim of a horrible man. And in a lot of ways, I might never heal completely from that experience, but I somehow did survive. I survived as a single mother in Egypt with 4 children, a single foreign woman. Egyptian women know that you don't not have a husband in Egypt, or a father at least. And I didn't have any man or husband or anyone. I learned Arabic because I had to. I have survived what I thought would kill me and come out better. So that's really my mission. That's, you talk about something higher than yourself, something that drives you. I want to encourage people to face the discomfort, to face the pain, and to see what you can learn from it and grow from it, and to take this one life you have and live it to its fullest potential. I'm against the hustle lifestyle. You got to just, give it your all 24/7, always be productive. I'm completely against this mindset. I believe in a slower life, one of meditation and of deep thinking, the examined life, in short. I don't ever stop asking questions. I'm always digging. And as I said, openly admitting I'm a Sufi at this point, and having removed hijab, which I told you earlier, I was going to mention that I stopped covering myself because I was threatened on like a pretty daily basis here in my hometown. People would call me raghead and try to drive me off the road, or yell bad things at me and my children in the store. And it was, I was afraid to leave my house and I have small kids. They were afraid. I couldn't take it anymore. And I understand that it's my white privilege that enables me to remove hijab and now be able to pass for white, to, just be able to look like any other normal American. And I've got my English accent, it all works out. But I know that the vast majority of my Muslim sisters don't have that privilege. If they removed hijab, they would still be brown. They would still be colored. They would still suffer, and they would still be marked. And so I recognize and appreciate the privilege that enables me to be safe. And I wish that for my sisters. And in many ways, my perspectives are not mainstream anymore. I have a fundamental belief about the purpose of hijab being to protect women initially. When God revealed the verses dictating that women should cover their hair and their neck and their everything except your face, basically. This was during a time when Muslim women lived in a Muslim society, and to be recognizably Muslim meant that you were protected. But in a non-Muslim society, and especially one that's so hostile toward Islam, I believe that wearing hijab it's dangerous for you a lot. Sometimes it's not, depending, maybe you live in a different part, it can be safer in metro areas maybe. But when wearing hijab puts your life in danger, all Muslim jurists, Muslim scholars agree that it's okay to remove it. But I go further and argue that it kind of removes the point of hijab if you're making yourself in danger, when the point was to make you safe. The point was never about modesty. And I'm very careful to only speak on things that I have the authority to speak on. So let me be clear that I'm not saying that my perspective is justified Islamically. It's just the perspective I have.
It wasn't some of the hijab like I've seen, and I don't know if it's true or not, but it'll show like Afghanistan in the 1960s, and the women are walking around and they're not dressed so differently from the women in America. And then it shows Afghanistan, 2000 and something, and they're all covered up. So was that being all covered up? I mean, and I just thought of it a second ago. I don't really know hardly anything about it, but I'm thinking if you're in some dusty area, you want to have your face covered.
It serves you. It makes sense. Yes. But that wasn't
if you're not in a dust storm, then what? I mean, is that true about Afghanistan? Like not very long ago, they did not have to wear it. They were.
Right. And Islam dictates that you should not be forced to wear it. The Quran is very clear. There is no compulsion in religion. The right has been made apparent from the wrong, and you have a choice. You have a free will. We have a choice to obey God or don't obey God. But what drives the things that happen, like in Afghanistan, is toxic patriarchy. It's not Islam. It's cultural beliefs about the inferiority of women and about the possession of women. You cannot see my wife because she's my wife. And yet there are women I personally know who enjoy being completely covered. They enjoy the anonymity. They enjoy being able to be known for their character rather than their looks. That is a beautiful concept. And one thing that really attracted me to Islam was the idea of modesty. We live in a culture where my body is on sale. My body is for sale. My body is a commodity. And to stand up and say, no, you cannot look at me. No, you can't stare at all the parts of me you want. This is mine, and I'll show it to who I want. that is a revolutionary concept. It is a beautiful, beautiful concept that I still stand behind. And I truly miss wearing hijab, honestly. There was something about it that I loved. And I'm sad that this is the reality of my country and Trump's America. Of course, it was happening before him, but you get my point. So it makes me very sad. And it's sad for me to be this example to my daughters. I'm a courageous person who faces the pain and the scary things. And to take off hijab because I was scared makes me feel like a coward. But I know I did it for the well-being of my children and myself. And that, I think, is what gives me hope.
Yeah, I guess that gets pretty complicated, because I would think, you know, why does it really matter what we wear?
Mm.
And I guess it kind of does. I mean, like it's a different kind of thing. But I was at the main jujitsu class I was going to. There was a uniform,
Mm-hmm.
and so you wear this uniform, and that's what you're doing. You're at this. It's a classical Japanese school, and
Mm-hmm.
you dress the classical Japanese way. And if you showed up in something else, like, what are you doing? You can't work out like that.
Right. Right.
So I kind of get that this is part of the tradition. This is what you're doing. But
Mm-hmm.
to be like,
Well, there are as many ways to wear hijab as there are people in this world. Like I said, when I first converted, if you go to the mosque where most of them are Saudi or Arab in general, it's going to be, no, you need to wear it like this, and this is how you do it. If you go to the Pakistani or the Indian mosque, it's going to be like, no, this is how you do it. And yet all of them are Muslim and all of them are acceptable. Now, Islamically, according to the texts, it would depend on who you talk to and their interpretation. But there are as many ways to cover, and so on. And one of the other reasons, behind the concept of hijab, which, by the way, applies to men, hijab does not just apply to women. It applies to men as well, but it's a different level of covering. So men have got to be covered at all times, from the belly button to the knees, no matter what. Even if it's outside and you're doing dirty work and you need to take off your shirt, that's okay. But you need to be covered from your navel really to the bottom of your knees at all times, no matter what. And men are supposed to, like women, not wear ostentatious clothing. Prophet Muhammad talked about not being prideful in your clothing, trying to make yourself look, make yourself look wealthy, make yourself look like you're better than everyone else. You're not supposed to be prideful in your dress. So there's good reasons behind it. And there, the fundamental concept in Islam is that your heart, if it's good, will push you to do good things. It will push you to make good choices. And so if you truly love God and you're truly trying to serve God, then you understand that the rules he gives us are for our best interest. The Quran is clear that God is not benefited by our worship. He doesn't need it. And he's not sad if we don't worship him. It's not, it's us that needs to worship him. We are in desperate need of connection with him. And the rules he gave us are for our own good. Problem comes when people, sorry, but usually men, twist those rules to maximize their power and their control. And that's what's happened in places like Afghanistan, and in situations like this. People have taken, like my ex-husband did, taken good things and twisted them. And if you don't know better, then you don't know better. And I've had to forgive myself. I've had really to work on forgiving myself for not knowing better and allowing him to brainwash me like he did. I get that question a lot from people. You're a Western woman. Shouldn't you have known better? And all I can say is, I thought it's what God wanted from me. I was wrong. I wish I knew better, but I didn't.
Yeah, and maybe you kind of get tiptoed into it, and like there's like this.
Yes.
Just cranked a little bit more. I don't like that, but okay, fine. Cranked a little bit more. I don't like that, but
Yes.
okay, fine. Cranked a little bit more, but okay, fine. And then next thing you know, you're in Egypt in the middle of some hellhole, and you're giving birth by yourself. When who would have, if you would have,
if someone told me that, no.
Yeah, what kind of crazy person would do that? But then you are. And I was thinking, okay, so you're like your husband now, and you mentioned a couple of things
Mm-hmm.
that I was, that kind of reminded me of uh, like today when I did earlier, I did a podcast earlier by myself, and
Mm-hmm.
I was talking about relationships and with three women in particular. And this was over like the last 5 years or something like that. But uh, I don't know. I don't want to like reveal too much about what somebody doesn't want to know. But say there's like traumas. So like these traumas in some form or another, like sexual abuse is super common with women, and it's crazy how many of the friends of mine and women that I've gotten to know have a similar kind of story. This thing happened when they were 12. This thing happened when they were 8. This thing happened when
Yeah.
we got married. This thing happened when, and the religious thing, I thought I was being a good Christian, so I did this.
Yeah.
Um, and then there's like something about knowing like you're talking about knowing the worth. And with one, I'll just say one woman that I know, uh, when I was talking with her, and we had kind of dated a little bit, and uh, it seemed like she kept talking about how she was end up being attracted to guys that end up being like narcissists or end up
Yes.
being, um, they seem cool at first, and then a couple months later, there's psychos
Yeah.
and or abusive in some way, sometimes physically, uh, and I'm listening to these stories, and after hearing about like her dad, I'm thinking, well, I'm just like, I'm not a psychologist by any stretch of the imagination, but I'm like studying some different psychologists, and it's like, okay, well, and I was just reading, before I was talking with her about this stuff, that like women that are abused when they're younger are much more likely to pick
Oh,
a
yeah.
husband that abuses them too.
Yes.
And for whatever, all these different reasons, like this cycle repeats itself. And so when I was trying to like talk to her gently about this, and I was saying, I was trying to like say like, don't you think it has something to do with your dad and you end up with these guys that are like this?
Mm-hmm.
Because there's like, and like before I even got out, like the part of like her dad, she was like, stop.
Mm.
And then she's like, maybe it was, I'll give you some credit, about 75% credit, but I just had this revelation. It's like, do you know why I was doing that? And she's like, because of my dad. And that was about what I was about to say. I was like,
Yeah.
I was trying to like tread gently to that point and ask about it, instead of like being this, like I
Mm-hmm.
actually knew, but then she was kind of like resisting us dating, even though I'm not like that. And then
Yeah.
she ends up going out with this guy who ended up being like that.
Yes.
And so like her and I were kind of dating for a while, and then it was just kind of like on and off, and kind of yes and kind of no. And then
Mm-hmm.
we weren't. And then she ends up with being with somebody else. And then a month later, she realizes that he's like this narcissist, creepo.
Yeah.
And so I guess like do you have advice for like the guy that's trying to be the good guy and try to help, like as the wounds heal? And
Yeah, I mean, so my current husband is, in much the same situation you are. He's a really good guy who just kind of unfortunately fell in love with a woman who's been really, 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 really broken by not just one, but several men. So I know that it can be incredibly difficult to navigate that. And I would say the best thing I can say is, you know, um, if you care for her, offer her what it is she needs. So maybe what she needs is your friendship. And maybe that's the best thing you can offer her. I know that there have been several times in my life where I met really good men and wasn't attracted to them. And I couldn't figure out why I wasn't attracted to them. And everything seemed right. And I was physically attracted and I liked their personalities, but something in me just, I couldn't go there. And I know now that that was the sane part of me that, you know, the sane part of me is trying to figure out what's the problem, but the troubled part of me, the experienced part of me is afraid of men who don't remind me of the men that modeled manhood for me. So my mother was a single mother. I was born when she was 17 years old. My father never wanted me, told me he didn't want me, tried to pay my mother to have me aborted.
Oh,
And I grew up literally, right now I'm living 2 blocks from where his house was. And I grew up only 2 or 3 miles away from him. And he never came to see me, maybe once a year on my birthday. And he would always say, I'm not ready to be a father. I wasn't ready to be a father, and I'm still not. And you have a stepdad, that's good enough. And,
oh God.
you know, and that was incredibly damaging because he had a daughter, he got married and had a daughter, and he raised her well. And to see the love that he gave her and that he withheld from me. And I would ask him on, you know, pretty regular occasions, why don't you love me? Like, why? And he'd be like, I don't know you. And it's too late to know you. Like, I'm, you know, I don't know what to say.
Damn. What's the age difference between you and her?
My mom, I mean, she was 17 when she had me. So.
No, I mean, it'd be
Sorry.
your sister.
Let's see here. I believe that I think probably about 10 years.
That's
I
not.
think about 10 years. And so then my mother's husband, whom she married when I was about 7, was a really good guy initially. He was like a rocker. He played guitar. He played drums. He was fun. I have a little sister that's 5 years younger, and he was just a really kind guy until I hit puberty. And then he wanted to sleep with me and always commented on my body. And I think the most damaging thing really was he would, if I wasn't wearing a bra, because like little girls don't like wearing bras, they're not comfortable, he would grab my nipple and twist it really hard and be like, titty twister, and laugh about
You're
it.
like 12 or something.
I was 12. And be like, if you don't wear a bra, then your boobs are going to sag and no one's going to love you. So I'm giving you titty twisters to teach you a lesson. Yeah, I'm not lying. And then, you know, he made me extremely uncomfortable, always. But so far as I know, other than that thing he would do, he never did anything else. But he's a real creeper, and he still is a creeper, and they're divorced some time ago. But yeah, that had a big, those 2 men, and they're, on the one hand, my own father didn't want me, and my stepfather wanted me too much in a creepy way. So that certainly had an impact on my self-perception. And I would say also the man that I was with before I converted, I was with a man for about 7 years. So from the time I was 16 until I was 23. And he, during the formative years of my life, taught me to hate myself. He taught me that I was fat and ugly and not worth love, but he wouldn't, he would, you know, want me and then not, and then I would move on, and then he would be angry and jealous and want me back. And it went on like this. And he was 7 years older than me. And so that was really formative as well, I think. And so all those men kind of served me up on a platter to the chick that I was married to. They kind of really just prepared me. They marinated me nicely for that experience, I think. So I think you're right in saying that women, well, first, statistically, you're right. Yes, women that are abused or neglected. In my case, I would argue that I was neglected as a child. I wasn't so much abused as I was neglected. Again, aside from the very strange things he used to do. I do recall from about the same age, I started having dreams he was raping me regularly. And I would I told my mom about these dreams, and it was scaring me, because then when he would give me a seemingly innocent hug, it would make me cringe because I just had a dream about him raping me. And ultimately I, you know, she encouraged me to tell him what the problem was. And I did. And that enraged him, really enraged him. There wasn't, I feel like a normal, I don't know, because I'm not a man, but I feel like a normal father figure, stepfather, father, in that situation would feel incredibly disturbed and compassionate and very concerned and loving and let's try and get help for this and see what's happening and why is this happening. But his response was just rage, that like somehow I wanted to have those dreams or something like that. And it was, you know, a really disturbing experience, I think.
Wow. So do you think mean, I'm not trying to like put memories in your head or anything, but like, do you think that like maybe he was doing something while you were asleep?
Yeah. So there have been things that happen in my family since then that give us the impression that maybe he was, not just to me, but to my sister as well. Um, we think maybe he was. But, you just really don't know. I will tell you that when I was about 17, I was a diehard Christian, Bible thumping, just evangelical. And I couldn't stop sleeping with my boyfriend because sex feels good. And I was 17. And I was disappointed in myself because we couldn't resist temptation and all that. And my stepdad was like, oh, isn't he coming to see you this weekend? Because he lived at the time in Texas and I was living in Illinois. Like, yeah, but I'm not really excited. Oh, well, why aren't you excited? Oh, because I don't know. We really have a hard time resisting temptation, so on and so forth, blah, blah, blah. And he's like, and we were in a car. I laugh now, but it was horrible at the time. He goes, if you just like pleasured yourself more often, maybe you wouldn't suffer from that temptation so much. Just saying. And I was like, mortified, just mortified. What kind of dad says that to his daughter? Like, I was mortified. Maybe that's, I don't know, maybe that's like a not too strange thing to say, but it made me really uncomfortable. And so that was another formative experience of
Yeah.
my young life.
Yeah, it is kind of weird. Like, what is off limits, because you don't want your daughter. My daughter will be 21 in February. My son
Oh
will be
gosh.
18 in February.
God bless you. Oh my Lord.
And
I'm not looking forward to those ages. I had all my kids bang, bang, bang. And I know I right now my eldest is almost 11 and he's just now getting to that like smart ass stage. I know that I have about 3 years left until all my kids hate me. And I'm just like, I'm so scared of those days coming. Yeah.
it's yeah, it's kind of it's crazy. They're good kids and good people, and it is kind of weird what happens. And what yeah, there's this a weird line because you want them to have sexual wisdom. And so like what's creepy, what draws like what
Yeah.
should you say? Because if you don't tell them, hey, this is what's, that here's a sacred way of doing things, here's what this is okay, but it's
Yeah.
not okay you don't have to do anything you don't want to do, but if you want to do something, it's probably okay.
Mm-hmm.
And it's kind of weird, and I can't say that I've really had that conversation, but I've like maybe encouraged like a girlfriend of mine at the time to, because like maybe it was easier for
Oh,
her to talk to her, and like,
yeah.
here's a book,
Yeah. No,
next
see,
subject. Now we're
I think the advice to an adult is sound advice. And I think if my mom maybe had said that to me, I probably would have been like, God, mom, you're so icky or something like that. But like, because it was him and because of our unique history, I felt it was really, really not good. Um,
yeah.
but I mean, at the end of the day, I'm 32 now and I have 4 children, and I'm very confident that moving forward, like I said, it can't really get worse than Egypt. Um, every worst case scenario that I can think of happening to me here is still never going to be as bad as Egypt. And that gives me, I sincerely believe that if people would have more horrible, horrible suffering experiences earlier in life, they would have much more gratitude. And they would have much more hope. I mean, I am so grateful. Sometimes, sometimes I wake up and I remember that I'm in my own country and I look outside and I see the trees that I know and the sky that I know. When I lived in Egypt, I felt like the sky and the trees hated me. Even they didn't want me there. I to look at my own country that I thought I would never see again, and you have to understand, I hated this place. I ran from my hometown as quickly as I could. I always wanted to be away from here. It's full of white racist bigots that are closed-minded. And I wanted to get away from this. And I ran. And having lived all over the world for all these years, I'm so grateful to be home. I'm so grateful to be with people that speak my language and people whose culture I can understand. And And again, a lot of that didn't happen until I stopped wearing hijab, because so long as I wore hijab, they didn't believe I was American. They didn't, even though, look at me and hear me speak, I'm clearly an American, but to them, that cloth on my head means that I'm a traitor and I'm dangerous and I don't love my country. And so they can't relate to me. People were surprised to know that I'm an intelligent person and I'm an educated person and I'm, so on and so forth. But I'm so grateful for that experience. And I'm so hopeful moving forward, what can come from this and the lives that I can touch with my story. That I remember I had a blog a long time ago. It doesn't exist anymore, but it was called Lemonade for Bitter Souls. And it was like, look, I'm bitter and I'm going to admit that I'm bitter, but you know what? We don't have to be bitter. Leo Babauta of Zen Habits? Zenhabits.com.
I don't think so.
Oh, he's amazing, incredible, amazing. He has a free book that he posted when I was living in Egypt, something about letting it go, something like that. It's called Letting It Go or Letting Things Go or something like this. If you just look up Leo Babauta, zenhabits.com. That was the first time I was introduced to the concept that your suffering is in your head. Your suffering is because of your expectations. If you don't expect things to go well, then you're not going to be disappointed if they don't go well. And that's not to be negative or be, pessimistic, but understand that your expectations are what are causing your suffering. If you're more inclined toward appreciation, you're going to be more inclined toward gratitude than unhappiness and misery.
I had, I was thinking of they say the road to hell is paved with good intentions. And
yes.
And I was thinking of that. And then I was thinking the road to hell is paved with our expectations, because if if you're in a relationship with someone and you're expecting them to be, okay, I have this ideal woman in my mind and here is this real woman, flesh and bone. Mm-hmm. Well, her hair is a little too short.
Yeah.
A little too thick. She's a little too thin. She's a little too talkative. She's a little too this. She's not enough that. She's then, you're not seeing actually her hair is the perfect length. She's was really great. And there might be some things that annoy me, but that's in my mind. And
it is in your mind. And I have to always, remind people that, well, two things. First of all, women think about men the same way men think about women. None of us is totally satisfied with our men in any way. And then I'd also like to, remember and remind myself often that my husband is not his body. My husband is the beautiful soul that's held inside that body. And if that body gained 500 pounds, he would still be the man I love. And if he lost 800 after that or whatever, he would still be the man I love. And it's funny you mentioned hair. My husband was enraged when I cut my hair off. I used to have very long hair and I cut it off. He was deeply so sad. And I did it because people would tell me afterward they liked it. And I would be like, thank you. I did it to spite my husband because we had a kind of you have to understand that trauma ultimately removes your autonomy from you. It takes away your sense of personhood. And in my journey of healing, I have had to take steps that I didn't even realize what I was doing. I just did what I needed to do. And I didn't recognize that it was really me reclaiming my autonomy. But that was one of the things. I cut my hair, and that, was me saying to him and to myself, you don't own me. I will do to my body what I want to do to my body, and you're not going to stop me. In your opinion, I'll ask you how you feel, and then I'll do what I want because it's mine. I got a tattoo, another one, but that's the first one I had since I became Muslim, and that also was really scary for him as a good Arab boy, And again, it was I'll do what I want to do to my body, and you can accept it or not, but it's mine. You don't own it.
Yeah, he doesn't have to say it's okay.
Exactly. And
you don't need him to say, okay.
I don't need your permission. You don't own me. Likewise,
what's the tattoo?
It's this one, the Memento Mori, the Stoic. Is it backwards in the picture?
No, it's right for me. Yeah.
Yeah. It's the Stoic, one of the Stoic phrases. It means remember death is coming, remember you will die. And for me, it's a constant reminder to live a life of honor, one that I can be proud of. And I'm I love it. I'm grateful for it. And, I guess in closing, I would say, trust the process. This is my best friend Hannah's eternal advice. Trust the process. You have to believe that what you're going through is the natural course of healing. If you just allow your soul to tell you what you need. And again, if you're not an introspective person like I am, if you don't know even what your soul needs, then this advice is pointless. But so first I would say, become more introspective, journal. I have journals from seriously when I was 13 years old. I still have them. And I see my patterns because I can see through I did this again and again and again and again, and it always went the same way. And so I know myself very, 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 very well. And so I think trusting the process for me meant letting go of all the things I thought I was supposed to be, and the way that I thought healing was supposed to look like, and the way that grief was supposed to look like, and the way that trauma should affect me. And I letting it go and just trusting that, okay, this is the thing that I feel like I need to do. And I don't know why, but I feel like I need to. And then looking back and seeing, wow, that was a really important choice I made. And it really helped me on this path of healing. And I think compassion for one another. Trust that the people you love are not the same people that they were even yesterday. There is nothing concrete about any of us. Change is the default. Evolution is always moving forward in us and around us. And to try to force yourself or those you love to stay who they are, to stay comfortable for you, is unkind. You're putting them in a prison that's not fair, or putting yourself in a prison that's not fair. We all need to evolve. We all need to change and grow, and not be afraid of the process, not be afraid of what's going to come of it. And maybe I'm still naive, but I fundamentally believe that all of us are truly good. I believe that goodness is the default, that we are born good, and that we want to be good, and that the pain we inflict on others is our response to the pain that's been inflicted on us. And I've even been able to forgive my ex-husband for the things he did to me. Do I like him? No. Do I want to be his friend? Of course not. I'm publishing this book, and I even told him about this book. And I'm not afraid of that. I like to repeat what Anne Lamott, famous author Anne Lamott, says, which is, if you didn't want me to write about it, you shouldn't have done it. And that's that's my perspective, but, gosh, I'm so grateful for the time that you have allowed me to take here, telling my story and sharing my wisdom.
Yeah, I think it's this is the 77th episode, and I'm pretty sure it's the most powerful story that I've had so far. There's been a lot of interesting guests, but this is just way different.
Of course, yeah.
It just
touch on fitness at all.
Well, a lot of the guests aren't on just to talk about fitness. That's kind of just a way to, because fitness can mean like mental fitness.
Yes.
But like consciousness is also in the title for a reason. And most of the shows, I might have like famous fitness people on, but we're not just talking about exercise. I'm trying to like dig deeper than that. I'd be,
of course,
I'd get pretty bored if we were just talking about exercise stuff. But yeah, this was really cool. I'm glad that you came on, and yeah, you have open invitation to come back on again. And it sounds like there's like other rabbit holes we could go down. You could keep telling different parts of the story and expound on the different parts of it. So it was, yeah, I'm really glad that you came on. I'm not sure how you found my post to begin with, if it was
it was hashtagged Stoicism.
That's what I was just going to ask.
That's
what I was going to ask. And so you probably follow Stoicism stuff. So
I do. Absolutely.
That's pretty cool.
I am hashtag the Muslim Stoic. There are so many similarities between Stoicism and Islam. We could have an entire podcast conversation about that itself. It is there's a lot there.
Yeah, that's very interesting. I'm also cool with like just pretty much giving you the microphone and taking off how you want, but we can also kind of like plan one out more. So I know, but I also like to be surprised. And, you know, a lot of times the listeners are, they're along for the ride with me. That's why I want to say, like, from the beginning that, yeah, I looked up all the stuff that you said and I looked through your stuff and I'm still not sure what to even ask because there's so much to it.
Yeah.
So I'm glad I didn't come up with like the 20 questions, and because it wouldn't have been what ended up coming out. So that it was really cool. So anything else? How do people like find your book? How do people
Yeah.
find out more about you?
Well, they should follow me on Instagram, Kaighla Um Dayo. It's I'm sure you'll have it spelled right there, Kaighla Um
Yeah.
Dayo, all one word.
Yeah.
If you want to know more about the New Muslims Field Guide, you can go to thenewmuslimsfieldguide.com. You can go to Amazon. Our book is for sale, both paperback and Kindle copy. And you'll learn more about my co-author, Teresa, who's amazing. And then my book, which is tentatively titled Crushed Flowers, Bent Ribs, will come out again, hopefully March or April. And you can find out about that. I'm going to post about it on Instagram. I'm not on any other social media. You found my LinkedIn profile, but I don't know. I'm not really sure LinkedIn counts. Social media is extremely toxic for me. So Instagram is so far been the least toxic. And so I am grateful for that. But yeah, that's where people can find out about me most is Instagram.
Yeah, very, very interesting story and powerful. And I'm glad you're back and on the road to back. So I will,
Same.
I'll stop the recording and I'm going to talk to you for just a second after I stop.
Okay.
Thanks again for being on.
No, thanks for having me.